The Rugby World Cup 2023 quarterfinals made for one of the greatest weekends of rugby of all time. So much to talk about in this episode as myself, Chris Hewett, Brendan Gallagher and Nick Cain look back at a remarkable weekend of rugby and look ahead to this weekend's semi-finals. Before we kick off this episode of the pod, I just wanted to give a shout out to our friends at Keith Prowse, the UK's leading provider of corporate hospitality experiences. Did you know that they have been offering hospitality experiences at Twickenham since 1979? So they know a thing or two on this. They've got an incredible selection of official hospitality experiences ranging from a live band, plenty of Guinness on tap, legendary players doing the rounds, some of the best seats in the house to watch the game, and loads more. So if you've got a special occasion coming up that you want to celebrate or a key client you're desperate to impress, make sure you get in touch with Keith Prowse by visiting their website, keithprowse.co.uk/Twickenham. I've heard that they're almost sold out of their Ireland packages already for next year's Guinness Six Nations, so I suggest that you guys hurry. I can't really put into words what happened this past weekend, so I'm not even going to bother trying for an intro. It was simply unbelievable, and obviously many are calling it the best quarterfinal weekend in history. No special guest this week. It's myself, Brendan, Chris, Nick. 4 games, all of them absolute nail biters. Chris, you missed last week. Welcome back. Just talk about what on earth happened.
Well, I think we should start by acknowledging that was as good a weekend of rugby as we're ever likely to see. You can talk in the past about great World Cup semi-final weekends. 99 certainly springs to mind. The 2007 quarterfinals when England mugged the Wallabies and then France did what they did to the All Blacks. But that was, and Fiji pushed the Springboks all the way, but it wasn't of the same level anywhere near in terms of standards as much as anything. I mean, the 2 big games that we knew were 50-50 games were extraordinary because all 4 sides played magnificently well for huge chunks of those games. I couldn't understand how Wales were such hot favourites against the Pumas. A bloke on the BBC managed to say the shock news from Marseille is that the Pumas have beaten Wales. So there's another sports presenter who knows everything there is to know about the great game of rugby union. I mean, Jesus. And Fiji made a better fist than I thought they would against England. So absolutely extraordinary. We've had much to say about World Rugby and their scheduling of this tournament and making the draw as early as they did, which was ridiculous. But they've ended up giving us three World Cup finals really, rather than 1. They were fantastic games. I'm heartbroken that the French lost because I think that the romance of the tournament was pretty much wrapped up in them. And we lose something exotic, for want of a better word, with their departure. But that's to take nothing away from the Springboks, who were superb.
It would have been better. It would have been better, Chris, if those 2 outstanding games, and the two others weren't half bad either, but the 2 outstanding games have been semi-finals. That would have been better. Yeah. And so I won't row back on the fact that they screwed up the draw. We've got 2 teams in the semi-finals of the World Cup who have come out of the weakest pool, have had the easiest passage by some distance. And I mean, if they manage to produce performances against the 2 favourites, New Zealand and South Africa, in the semi-finals, well, maybe we can revisit it. But if it's sort of wins by a distance, the issues surrounding the early draw will come back to bite them, and it shouldn't happen again.
No, I agree with that. Do you think that maybe it's something we can explore a little later, but I just throw it in at the start. Do you think that had those 2 the 2 big matches, so to speak, being the semi-finals, as they should have been? I mean, any normal draw would have that's what would have happened.
Yeah.
But would all 4 of those sides played in the same kind of way with the same kind of intensity? in the semi-final, or it certainly would play with the same kind of intensity, but would they have semi-finalitis and just scrunched up a little bit and played a lot more percentages? Because some of the rugby played, given what was at stake and given the standards of the four sides, some of the rugby played was absolutely exhilarating in a way that you don't always see in semi-finals. Occasionally you do, but
that's true. But given the quality of the sides, given what was at stake, I'd say yes. You know, there's no reason to think that one of them would suddenly have gone into their shells. I mean, the South Africans, you know, what did they do? They went back to what they did against England in the 2019 final. They put the ball up in the air, and their kick chase is the best in the world. And you know, their finishers among the sharpest. I mean, Colby has actually been pretty quiet most of this tournament, but he was absolutely bloody explosive on Sunday. You know, I mean, he was a match winner. And the thing about South Africa is that a lot of their best athletes play the sport. You know, I think that they gravitate towards rugby union more in South Africa than almost any of the other countries, maybe apart from New Zealand. And you can see it because they have this propensity for finding game breakers in big games. They do it with a degree of regularity that it's not an accident for me.
Yeah. Just on Sunday's game, obviously people are talking about where it ranks in classic World Cup matches, and I'm actually going to open that door now. Brendan, not just quarterfinals, but all-time games, where would you put it, especially that first half?
Well, yeah, actually, I'm sitting down trying to think of this, doing my column this week. I'd say both the two great semis we had, the quarterfinals we had, are right up there with the one that is acknowledged as the best ever World Cup match, which is the 1999 semi-final, New Zealand, France. I mean, you know, it's very, very rare that you get the highest quality teams giving it to each other for 80 minutes in that sort of fashion, in that sort of setting. So absolutely right up there. And on any other weekend, the other two semi-finals would rank pretty highly. They were really good matches of rugby to watch, really good games. So absolutely historic weekend in terms of quality of competitive rugby. And I don't know about you, I got to Monday morning, and we've all been there as journalists. You know, you get like the end of the Tour de France, you've been at it for a month, end of the Olympics, end of the World Cup, and there's that massive deflation on the, you know, the Monday morning depression. And I kind of had that this Monday, and there's 2 weeks of the tournament to go, which is really odd. And there's a lot of rugby. Well, not a lot, but there's some big rugby to come, and there's a couple of teams there which I thought have a bit of skin in the game. You know, always had a soft spot for the Pumas. Would love to see England somehow get something out of this World Cup, but actually, it almost felt like the World Cup had ended on Monday morning. Everything that was being absolutely brilliant about the World Cup was there in the weekend, and some of the teams were going. They've gone home. You know, Fiji, France, Ireland, Portugal last week. The teams that you engage with and feel, you know, emotionally are gone. That's it. No more.
The comparison you make with 99 is a good one. I mean, those semi-finals, which were both played at Twickenham,
and saved the tournament because
it was a Wales tournament. It hadn't been or a Welsh tournament. It hadn't been the greatest tournament. They did save the tournament. But if you remember those games, on the Saturday, the Wallabies played the Springboks in a tryless game that went to extra time. And that was a game for the connoisseur. I mean, I thought that was a great game with two very good sides. It was a magnificent contest, but you needed to know a bit about the game to get to extract full value from it. The following day was, you could have come down from Mars and understood what the excitement of what was going on. But that was a pretty callow New Zealand side. Tane Randall, the captain, then said afterwards that we knew we were in trouble the moment we were playing a very good side, playing well, because they didn't have a lot of that experience. People like Fitzpatrick and Michael Jones and those great All Black players had gone between 95 and 99. They'd lost quite a few big players. So in a sense, that France-New Zealand game, thrilling though it was does not stack up against the stuff that really we saw at the weekend, because in both of those big games, all four sides, none of them were callow. All four sides were brilliantly prepared, and they were at the top of their game. I mean, New Zealand are getting to the top of their game. The other three are at the top of their game, or were at the top of their game.
And in a way, Chris, there's the rub in some ways. What I think the question maybe that ought to be asked is, has there ever been a World Cup in which there have been four teams who were so close, so clear of the rest, and so close to each other in standard, that almost these games were waiting to happen? Because I'm not sure that I can remember one. I think that we've always had, maybe we've had three teams in it, but one of them's fallen off quite badly at some stage. Occasionally we've got a great final. I mean, look, I'll put nail my colours to the mast. I mean, for me, the greatest game that I've seen in my journalistic career in a World Cup was England winning the World Cup final in Sydney against the odds, because of the way in which it was stacked against England by the time they got to the final. I also thought it was a fantastic occasion. I thought it was a very good game. It was, it was on a knife edge. The only final, I think, apart from the 95 final, which has gone to extra time. So, for me, I put that up there because it was a great day for English rugby. I put that up there. But these games, in terms of the quality of the games, in terms of the standard of rugby that was played, I think were in, that's 20 years ago. And I think it was a different level.
No, I agree totally, Nick. And in fact, that's what I'm listing all the I'm trying to see if there's, I've listed the 10 finals and given them a sort of 5-star ranking. And in fact, I'd say the England match, I'm giving 4-star, because actually it was everything you said. But as a game of rugby, if you were looking at the highlights and took away all the sounds, took away the context, it was a very good game of rugby, but it was not even remotely close to the games we saw this weekend as a game of rugby. As
not in terms of spectacle,
as an athletic event.
Yeah.
As an athletic event, these two matches we saw this weekend were absolutely off the Richter scale.
Yeah. I'd go with that. I guess the sort of the changes in specialist conditioning, the way that benches are used. I mean, the South African bench is, and their use of the bench is a street. The thing that I think separated them from France was that, again, as it did England in the Yokohama final and so on. Their use of their bench is absolutely, on the button. They don't make many mistakes. The Fourie thing, I guess, it's worked out for them, but the overall strength of their side made sure that it would. Oxenche coming on and Aldegheri coming on, first scrummage that they're head to head. Aldegheri pops out of the scrum. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure they put 3 points over as a consequence of it. And it was mirrored, when Aldrit and Olivon went off. I thought that, and Antonio, they took them all off pretty well in a group. I thought then that you could see that there was. I'm not saying that any of the Frenchmen who came on played particularly badly, but there was just a gap in terms of what the Springboks brought in intensity to the closing stages, and also just that sort of cunning that you get. That set play where Etzebeth scored, they deliberately, I think, constructed it so that he was running at Jalibert. And Jalibert and a couple more small backs, basically, and the laws of physics told in Etzebeth's favour and his desire.
I thought they were odd replacements by France, Nick. I mean, all those three you mentioned were going pretty well when they were taken.
They were.
I think it was anticipating or trying to match. They got dragged into that tactical game of matching the box.
And how often
were going fine?
How often do you see it happen? You see it happen all the time when Argentina in the game against Wales brought on Alemano. They brought on one tranche of replacements and then another lot later on, Sclavi included, which made a difference. But the first group that he sent on, they'd actually been defending quite well. In fact, they'd been defending very well. And all of a sudden, these three guys come on, and the defensive structure is disjointed for sort of 5 minutes. Bang, Wales, Thomas Williams is through. It's fascinating.
I think you make a good point about the box. To me, there were a couple of things about the French performance and everything around the French performance which cost them. I think Galtier may have got the selection slightly wrong. He had 2 second rows who were pretty much identical in terms of style and skill and shape and what have you. I think I might have started with Taoufik Fanua for just the ballast, with Woki and brought someone like Flamand on, or the other way round. That's not to say, I thought Woki, especially in the line-out, was absolutely exceptional on Sunday. I think he's an extraordinary player with quite a lot to give going forward, a hell of a lot to give going forward.
As is Flamand.
Indeed. There are a whole bunch of that French side who are going to be around in 4 years' time. And you've also got an extraordinary under-20 side, which has just won that title, underpinning them. Yeah. And so there's going to be a lot happening in French rugby. And I think their time might be in 2027.
Yeah.
But in terms of this weekend, I also thought that knowing that the Box, who play quite a simple game, and it's an intelligent game, but it's a simple game. The French made more mistakes because they do more things to cock up, basically, than the Box do. The Box boil this down to first principles. When it really matters, they boil rugby down to first principles, and they largely get it right because they have the physicality that allows them to be able to do that. The French do slightly more extravagant things and make more mistakes. I would have picked Villiers as well, assuming he was fit, because he's a dog, an absolute dog. And they needed every fighter they could lay their hands on Sunday. And they left a couple of them, either in terms of size or attitude or both. They left a couple of them on the bench. So I also would have started with Francois Cros rather than Gelon, who I don't think Gelon, fine player though he is absolutely back to where he was pre-injury.
You know what, Chris? I thought he played extremely well. The period
as well,
he was on, I thought he was very, very good. But you've got a very good point. Villiers is the best turnover counter-rucking back, almost. Certainly outside back that there is in the world. And I found his disappearance odd. I don't know whether he was injured or not. The kid B.A. Barry is obviously very, very fast. But Colby, showed him the door. Effectively, I think that then Antonio and Bai are a notch up on the front rows that they brought on. I thought Malvaka was fantastic for them.
Incredible!
I thought he was off the charts.
He has best hooker in the world in waiting written all over him. Crikey. Yeah. He was exceptional, absolutely exceptional.
And I thought that Dupont as well, coming back in. God, I thought he was again off the scale. I thought that he was fantastic, but there was suggestion that maybe they could have subbed him with 10 minutes to go or whatever, but I don't think I would have done.
I thought he was absolutely incredible, Nick, but there was one thing I will criticise him for, and this is probably the first and only time I will ever criticise him. He didn't manage the ref. Now, I'm not wildly impressed with O'Keefe. And against Ireland, remember, I pointed it out, Johnny had to go over to him and tell him to stop coaching them at the rucks and to ping them. And he apologised to Johnny, and Ireland got the next 4 penalties. Well, he was at it again on Sunday. He was coaching the box at the rucks, and there was 3 or 4 times there was a clear penalty, and it was get back, you can't do that, don't go there. And he had this constant dialogue with Colosi, which is entirely okay. He's the skipper. There was no dialogue whatsoever, really, with Dupont. And Dupont is one of those guys, he goes into himself. He leads totally by example. He will not allow anything to distract him. He's in the zone. He's the best player in the world. That's what he does. And somebody in that French team needed to go up to O'Keefe and say, this can't go on. You've got to start pinging them, just like Johnny Sexton did. Now, it takes a big personality to do that, doesn't it? To go up to
and someone who speaks English.
And again, exactly. I mean, he was so many cozy chats with South Africa. It was untrue. And no dialogue with France whatsoever. And he talks French.
They are stuffed outside.
He talks French, but he wouldn't talk French in that match. And he wouldn't talk to the French. It was extraordinary. And guess what? He's got South Africa again this week. Third match in 4. He's ref in South Africa, or coaching South Africa, as whichever way you want to put it. He's got to stop that. You can't do that as a top.
You know what? I thought that this thing of referees talking constantly is out of hand.
Absolutely.
You know, there is far too much dialogue between players and referees. I mean, Luke Pearce was conducting a bloody seminar against, when Fiji played Portugal. He must have had a 5-minute conversation with everybody on the bloody pitch. I just think that it's nuts. The laws are there. The players are, they're professional players. They're meant to know the laws inside out. And for me, it's one of the worst aspects of the game at the moment because it takes an inordinate amount of time. That's one thing. I think even bloody, all this stuff, Warren Gatland's gone on about it. We pick our captain, for his ability to talk to the referee and so on and so forth. Look, I get it up to a point, but if the referee's doing his job, the referee shouldn't need to have constant dialogue with captains and so on and so forth. What I really liked about Wayne Barnes's performance against Ireland was that he warned Porter at the scrum on 3 separate occasions, absolutely crystal clearly what he was doing wrong. And Porter was so emotionally tangled in the game that he didn't listen. And it cost Ireland. It cost Ireland, deeply. So, and that's the sort of refereeing that I want to see, just a very terse comment to somebody about if they're persistently infringing or whatever, if a team's persistently offside. I mean, that's one of the things with the box. They all get away with murder, to be quite honest. I mean, the number of times you see defensive lines offside is nobody's business. It's just epidemic. And that should be, that's something that assistant referees and referees can't get wrong. It shuts the bloody game down. So for me,
they're under pressure to minimise the number of penalties they give, aren't they? Yeah, this whole spectacle argument, they don't want to give away those penalties. Look, the one referee who was very headmasterly about this and does not have conversations about things is Matthew Carley, who simply doesn't engage in that way. And I think that's a strength of his. I used to think he was a rather officious git, but actually, I like the fact that he's a rather officious git. I mean, leaving aside the whole Wales-Fiji thing at the back end of the game, but I quite like his style.
He had a bad 10 minutes, but I agree, Chris. I quite like his style.
I agree with you. I think this concept, it tells you that the laws are nowhere near clear enough.
Yeah.
If referees are constantly having to talk people through it. And you don't have to be Carwyn James to work out that there is a huge disadvantage for a side whose first language is not English. And in the French case, some of them will speak very little English because they don't want to, or they've not been brought up to do so. They are at a massive disadvantage. I don't know how strong Dupont's English is, but
it's average, but it's not great. Aldrich should have taken it on himself because Aldrich has got perfect English.
The more they're talking, the more the non-English speaking side is at a disadvantage. And it's stared you in the face. And at least people like Wayne Barnes have tried to put on enough French to get themselves through a game at a reasonable level.
But part of the problem is the cacophony of noise around every decision, in these big games is just bloody, you being a bloody kindergarten, for the amount of playtime. I mean, it is unbelievable. And one of the things we've talked about it, everybody talks about it, is that one of the greatest weapons that a referee has got to restore some bloody order is to march the offending side or the loudest voice back 10 yards. And they virtually never do it. They virtually never do it. It restores order faster than anything. If you're losing, and if you double it up, if they carry on, if you're losing 20 yards, all of a sudden you're in danger of giving away, they kick to the corner, you're in danger of giving away a try. It'll shut people up bloody quickly. And they need to, because everybody is appealing. Everybody.
Yeah.
It's such an important area, Nick.
You see people going at the assistant referees almost as much as they're going at the referee. It's bloody. It's something that needs to be addressed seriously.
I'll give you just one little snapshot here. Half time, as it came out. Sorry, as it came out for the second half, he was talking to Closey for 90 seconds there as they waited for everybody to come out. Now, a bit of that was to inform him that the Etzebeth yellow was staying as yellow, I think.
Yeah.
But a lot of it wasn't. He then went over to Dupont, and it was a cursory 4 or 5 seconds. He's coming back on. And then you got after the match, Colosi is making and he's a great bloke, Colosi. He's making a great point of the excellent communication with the referee. Well, yeah, too bloody right. O'Keefe did nothing but either talk or coach the boss. So no wonder they think the communication was great. France think I was reading Midi this morning. France think it was rubbish. They think they were really done by the ref. And now South Africa have got the same ref against England.
Well, Dupont started that. Those questions immediately after the game, didn't he?
And he never whinges. Have you ever heard Dupont whinge about anything?
I don't know. I haven't studied him.
I've never heard him utter a word of complaint about anything.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't lose many, in fairness.
No, he doesn't lose many.
I mean, there's always going to be a bit of a Rainbow Warrior hangover about anything involving New Zealand and France. I mean, but both countries are going to have to let that go, I think. But I do get unnerved by the referees who get so pally with players that they call them by their Christian names.
Well, they call one team by their Christian names, and the other bloke doesn't get mentioned.
Yeah, well, I was going to go on to say even worse is when it's only one team. I mean, I can't remember a referee who's called any of the Fijians by their Christian names. Heaven knows why.
And even Wayne Barnes, who's having a great tournament, does that. He was calling Ali Price, who's not even the captain, Ali, throughout that match he did with Scotland.
Should go back to Tony Spreadbury, who called everyone a plonker.
I think that's probably
he knew how to cut through the spreaders. I think there is an issue, and of course France will look at the Smith turnover, won't they? And they'll point to that as a crucial moment, an absolutely crucial moment, which was a bad call by the ref.
And it was a bad call.
What I remember Spreaders saying all the time was, he knows, as he ran.
Well, yeah, and went on to say, he knows he's a plonker.
I think all this is calling for a sort of a big look at the refereeing after this World Cup, because it has been a big talking point. And we haven't even mentioned, obviously, the inconsistencies of the high charges. So I think there are multiple layers to this issue. I want to sort of move on to some other key moments in the game. And Nick, I wanted to ask you about one moment in particular when Damien Willemse caught the ball on the full in the 22, calls a mark, and then puts the ball down for a Springbok scrum. The Boks then take the scrum, get the penalty, kick the ball 40 yards up the pitch. Have you ever seen that? And was it not just the most Boks thing ever?
Yeah, it was. It was a psychological statement, and they made it. That's the thing. You can do things like that, and then backfire horribly. And it shows the level of their confidence in their scrum, because the French scrummer, Antonio was on at that time, Bai was on, Malvaca was on. The French scrum is, I mean, it's the best in Europe, I'd say. I think it's slightly better than Ireland's, and they made that statement and it showed their confidence. It showed France their confidence, and it was a big psychological statement. It, you know, to actually muscle them in the way in which they did. To France's credit, they actually came back at them at the next couple of scrums. But the thing about it is, I mean, what would really interest me is if they started with Oxenche and Malherbe together. I guess it's always Malherbe and Kitsov and so on. So if they started with those two, I sort of think that they're going to mangle anybody, and that might be something coming England's way on Saturday.
I've seen it before once or twice. I used to, because I'm a bit of a nerd, I've watched Rugby Europe games on the stream for 4 or 5 years. Georgia have done it occasionally. They opt for the scrum because, number one, they can just grind the opposition. They can get yellow cards. They can tire them out, get yellow cards, and then they always get the penalty kick anyway. But they know at that level that they are going to win that scrum. Just at that exalted level at the weekend, that was quite a moment, wasn't it?
The thing that struck me about it when I first saw them do it was I thought that there's a set move coming off this, because remember, you instead of getting having a flat line defense against you from a scrum, and you know, from the set piece is the only time where, you know, the backs are lined up one-on-one, and I thought that might be what was coming. When they hoofed it down the pitch, I thought, no, it was just a statement of physical force. But you know, I mean, that's the other beauty of the scrum is
I think it may have been a bit of a shock to nothing as well, to be honest, Nick. Insofar, I mean, you've got to get it right. Once you've made that call, you have to get it right. And if it had gone wrong for them, then been a shocker. But also, they didn't want they didn't want to go too near too many lineouts. I mean, Woki had really got stuck into him at the lineout. So if you're just going to, they were only going to kick the ball in the air anyway. If you see what I mean. So if they just won the scrum, not got a penalty, they'd have box kicked it, I imagine, from there. Whereas they were going to keep it in field from the mark and from Valencia's mark, because they didn't want a defensive line out in their own half any more than they could help. So it was good thinking. I mean, and it goes back to the way that the box think their way through very, very intense contests and come out in really meaningful must-win matches. They come out ahead a hell of a lot. And part of that goes back to the whole first principles thing, and they do think very clearly under pressure. It goes back to the old England thing in 2003, and like Woodward Teacup thing. They do it. They don't get confused or lose their rags or get in a muddle. They think clearly, given their duty.
And Erasmus, for all the the sort of mad professor stuff, he does think out of the box, and a lot of what he does, left field thinking, a lot of it. Not all of it. He's a little bit like Woodward in that regard. Not all of it, but a lot of it actually makes a difference.
He does, and he's also the controversial. He's the controversialist Eddie Jones would want to be, because he winds everyone up and wins, whereas Eddie at the moment is just winding everyone up and losing.
Good point.
I thought it was a great call not to start with Faf de Klerk, because Faf is that character, and he's also that extraordinary sort of player. He's one of the very few who could take Dupont on in a one-on-one battle, and he would have got dragged into an ego fest there, Faf. Whereas Reinach, brilliant player, and he's playing very well, but he serves the team, gets on with the job, and that was a great mixture. Then bringing Faf on for the second half when it had all dampened down a little bit. So he's just a very, very clever selector, and also the South African think tank generally comes up with his stuff. And they got it right.
I agree. Bringing on de Klerk at that time, somebody of his energy, his aggression, it was very, very smart. I agree with you. I thought when I saw it, I thought, why wouldn't you start with your with de Klerk for what he brings you in combativeness and so on. But yeah, it was very, very smartly done, and Reinach played bloody well.
Yeah, he's playing
It would
brilliant.
have been very interesting, wouldn't it, if the French, as they could easily have done, had got 14 points up. In those early great swathes of French attacking, and of course the Box pickpocketed them a couple of times and got themselves on the board and kept themselves in the game. But France could have been away.
Fickle butchered that 2-on-1, didn't he?
Yeah, they could have been a long way in front. And what do you do at 10 then? What about your Libok-Pollard balance if you're big points down, and it's going to be difficult to chip away with 3 pointers, and you need to score tries? It would have been very interesting. But hey, if the dog hadn't stopped, he'd have won the race.
Did the Etzebeth knock back, knock forward ever go to the TMO? Was it ever examined? I can't remember.
We never got
looked
much
at
of a
in the background, I expect, whatever that means.
Yeah.
I thought that was a very good call. Having had a go at O'Keefe, I thought that was an excellent call there. Etzebeth was clearly making every effort to knock the ball back. And even if it dribbled forward a little bit, I don't know if it did, the offence is deliberate knock on. It was not a deliberate knock on. It was a deliberate knock back, trying to knock back. Yeah. That was brilliant play by Etzebeth, and that bit was well refereed.
But if it was a knock on, it would have been a different, possibly a different outcome.
Yeah. Oh, listen, and we haven't even talked about this conversion yet, which I'm still not remotely convinced. We've seen no wide-angle footage, official wide-angle footage. I've seen footage from the crowd, where he seems to go a little bit early to me, but we needed to see it.
Quick.
We needed to see it. That's an incredibly unique decision, and the world hasn't seen the proper footage.
I saw a calculation online of the distance that Colby had to run to get to where he got to in the time that Ramos started his, and he would have had to have started a 100-meter race faster than Bolt to get there.
Well, Bolt wasn't the quickest starter.
He wasn't the quickest starter, is the only thing.
Yeah. So, and he is a great athlete, and I think it was very close. But my point there is, what constitutes starting a kick? Afterwards, they were saying he'd noticed that Ramos twitches his shoulder just before he starts. But that's not starting a kick. Otherwise, you'd have Owen Farrell does all this scanning business. Yeah. You've got Dan Bigger, who is never still at any point before he starts kicking.
Well, this
is somebody could run it.
There was obviously the infamous
moving towards the ball.
Run 30 seconds before he kicks the ball.
Oh, can you imagine Dan Bigger or Wilkinson with all their twitches? I mean, if the first twitch is the start of the kick,
that's a very ill-defined law
in the second half. It's the whole
very
thing
ill-defined.
Yeah.
I think the Box got away with one there, but I will give it to him that he had done his homework and he knew that he could make it very, very close and at least ask the decision, cause the decision to be made by the officials. But I don't know if they TMO'd it. I didn't, but we never got the full replay, did we? And we never got quite a lot of that.
But isn't that classic rugby union situation? This is professional rugby union. This is where the game is. Again, there's so much to applaud in what happens on the field. We've seen 2 absolutely fantastic games last weekend, but these sorts of things go on all the time. There's no way. The technology is there. The chip technology is there. They don't invest in it. The camera angles should be there. It shouldn't be a debate. They should be able to bloody well to replay it instantly and get an absolutely informed decision on it.
And you know what, Nick? If Colby pulled that off, if he did that genuinely, fantastic. Replay it, put it up there. That is the gold standard. That is how you charge a conversion legally. Put it there. But we're left in no footage.
Shrouded in mystery.
In limbo land.
Yeah. Nuts.
I think this would be clarifying, to be honest, since do you remember when James O'Connor was playing for Australia against the Barbars and Peter Stringer runs up and poaches the ball off his tee? Does anyone remember that? And the movement that
I do, but the one, yeah,
Connor putting his arm out and then across him, which was this weird thing he used to do, and he stopped doing it after that point. And to me, and I was quite young at the time, so maybe my understanding of rugby wasn't great. But to me, putting your arm out and then putting it across your shoulder still isn't starting a kick. I would think it's the first movement of the feet. And so to me,
that used to be the law. Yeah. That used to be the law. The first move towards the ball was the law for 100 years or more. Because you've got all these kickers, they do this sighting thing, don't they? They put their arm up like that and they sort of draw, diagonals and stuff. Lots of movement going on. It's when you move towards the ball is when you start the kick.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty, in the end, for referees, that's a pretty straightforward judgment,
There's been quite a lot during this World Cup that we haven't really seen. There has been quite a lot. It started with the first game when there was a hell of a lot in the France-New Zealand game. The television, I mean, God knows what's going on in the stadiums. The television viewers when you watch the BT Sport or whatever it's called now, or Sky Sports and what have you, you're used to seeing those replays.
Yeah.
In fact, I think there's a conspiracy to keep Austin Healey, and I know Austin's one of the most popular people in the world. I think there's a conspiracy to keep him out of commentary boxes because Austin sees so much that other people don't see. I mean, no matter what you think of Austin, he's a hell of a spotter of things. And of course, the way it's constructed here in Premiership rugby, when he spots something, the TMO is alerted because they're listening.
Yeah.
And then they look at it. I mean, crikey, we'd never get to the end of this tournament if Austin.
I mean, the television coverage that I've seen, I haven't thought a huge amount of the match coverage. I think that very often they've got the cameras pointing in the wrong direction at the wrong time. The endless shots of the crowd, I mean, it's okay to have them interspersed sometimes to give a sense of atmosphere and so on, but not as much as they do it, so that people are sort of gurning at the TV and then waving, to see when they're up on the big screen. I just think, I mean, if you're missing something on the pitch that's, absolutely crucial as a result of that, it's poor, and a lot of the coverage has been sort of, I'd say, average.
And it makes you realise how spoilt we've been with first Sky and then BT Sport, that they took it to new levels. And then when it drops down, you don't half notice it.
Yeah. And I'm guessing that's the host broadcaster, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not clear here if the host broadcaster is the French or if World Rugby have put in a set of producers. Now, I know they were talking about that some years ago, of having like neutral production team. So perhaps we ought to look into that. But I mean, ordinarily, you'd think it's the French TV. I don't think it is French TV producers doing it. Directors, actually. It would be. I think
it's like a World Rugby, panel. Brendan. If it was World Rugby, it would be far better than it is now.
Yeah. Look, we need to start to move on to these semi-finals because we're obviously getting to Wednesday. Sorry, well, we're getting to near the semi-finals. We're almost less than 48 hours out. I just want to talk about Ireland quickly. When we were predicting where Ireland would get to in the World Cup, I don't think any of us said they would go out in the quarters. I should also say that our predictions last week have been completely upstaged because our 4 semi-finalists were France, Ireland, England, and Wales. So that's gone very, very well for us.
Oh, hang on! I had Pumas.
Yeah, I know, but I just mean there's a balance.
The consensus. Yeah,
I'd have gone Pumas, and I've also had New Zealand to win the tournament.
You did. To be fair, I thought you were about to blow smoke up your own ass there, but you actually are telling the truth.
Well, I am. Actually, I've lost a bit of weight, and I can't really find it now.
You didn't disappoint.
But obviously, Ireland's quarterfinal, semi-final hoodoo continues. 37 phases is, I believe, the most phases ever in a World Cup match, which was obviously the number that they tapped out at when they were looking for that match-winning score. What is this? I mean, Brendan, obviously, I'll come to you. The quarterfinal hoodoo burden and stuff it's heavier now than ever, and this is maybe 3- or 4-fold.
Yeah, I mean, the important thing is it's not a jinx. In most of the quarterfinals, Ireland have played bloody poorly and deserved to lose. They played pretty well in 91, where they gave Australia plenty of hurry up. And that's probably about it, really. They played incredibly well this weekend. It could have gone either way. There's no jinx or hoodoo involved on this occasion. They just lost a wonderful rugby match. And bloody hell, if they'd won it after 37 phases, if they could have forced that position that they needed to try, didn't they? If they could have done that, that would have been the greatest finish in the history of rugby. So I don't, no blame, no, what's the word? There's no need for mixed emotions on this. It was a great game, and they just lost it, and that's all there is to it. You don't have to imply more to this than exists.
Yeah, I think that a 37 to keep the ball through 37 phases in a game of that intensity with so much hanging on it is a tribute to Ireland in almost every sense. The only thing that you would say, or that I would say, is that in their back line there is one player that I would say is an absolute game breaker, and that's Keenan. Otherwise, I'm not sure. And there was, Sexton at times in that possibly showed his years in some ways, but who wants to make the mistake that ends, that brings a phase of that sort of continuity to an end? The only thing that I would say, there's, the game needs heroes, and Sexton is an Irish hero, no question at all about it. He'll go down as one of their greatest players. But some of the focus on him, it sounded like Johnny Sexton's quarterfinal, Johnny Sexton's exit. It was an exit for a whole generation of players. Sometimes, this focus on just one individual, and he's a controversial individual in many ways too, it's over the top, way over the top. I mean, he's been a tremendous player. He's had, huge success. He's had great plaudits. And it's, as we know in professional sport, nobody writes their own end script. Doesn't happen, or very, very rarely. So, yeah.
But at the end of the day, and Brendan, again, I'll come to you. Sorry for the repeat trip, but it is the end of a remarkable career.
Yes, and actually, I expect if you're going to do your moments of the weekend in a few minutes, I think I'll sort of dive in early on. I thought that it was quite emotional watching that last 37 phases, because as Nick says, that wasn't just Johnny Sexton, although he was trying to orchestrate it for one final time. But it was Peter O'Mahony's farewell sort of thing. I doubt very much if we'll see Bundy Aki, Porter, others in another World Cup. And this was their final fling, and I just thought it was an incredible moment, an incredible, incredible 4 minutes, wasn't it? I think the 37 phases. It was just enthralling to watch, but it didn't work, and then Johnny at the end, he's still giving out. Do you remember? Was it Rico Ione? Somebody walked past him and he gave him a mouthful, and actually, I was gonna be critical of him, but actually wasn't that just so Johnny? Right at the end, he's still bloody mad and still giving out. I thought, well, fair play to you.
I've heard that Rico Ioane said to him, enjoy retirement and don't miss your flight home tomorrow. So it's a pretty brutal thing.
Fair play.
Pretty generous.
Yeah.
It could have been much worse.
Yeah, it could have been a lot worse.
The problem is we've no idea what Sexton said to him during the preceding 80 minutes.
Well, indeed. And I think we can also take it that if the boot had been on the other foot, Johnny Sexton would not have been worried about Rico missing his flight. He might have said something slightly different. Yeah. Just on the 37 phases. I mean, I think there's a peculiarity about that insofar as And this has to do with the game clock, of course, which I would have out of the game, personally, because teams play differently and have to play differently when they know that it's the last play. So the All Blacks can only do so many things with security, because the last thing they want to do is face a 5-meter line out, blah, 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 and the sort of semi-inevitability, although it's nothing is inevitable in this World Cup, of a side mauling it over if the line out works. But I just thought it was a great, great moment. And like Brendan, I'm going to preempt it now. The great moment for me was Sam Whitelock. Just a fantastic display of experience and the patience and the clear-headedness born of that experience to take the risk, because it's always going to be a risk trying to get the ball back in those circumstances. Much greater risk than it is at any other point during the game.
Yeah.
And he took that risk to identify the isolated player, get himself over the top in a completely legal fashion, and come up with the ball. I love Whitelock with bits. I think
it's
he's been
interesting.
a remarkable player for them.
Yeah.
I thought it summed up his elder statesmanship, all the good things about his elder statesmanship. And I, for one, would quite like to see him go on and be the first player ever to win a third World Cup. But hey, who knows?
Yeah. I mean, it's also tribute to the fact that he wasn't hanging in quite the same way as every other player. Well, not every other player, but he'd only been on for about 6 minutes. So, his mind was still non-fatigued. Oh. Let's put it that way. Whereas some of the others, having played, either the full 80 or a good part of it, you could see at the end of that move. I mean, the one thing that you would say, anybody keeps the ball through 37 phases, the stress that it puts on a defense, and just one bloke to slip up, to be fatigued, and to make a mistake, miss the tackle, whatever else. And that's tribute to the All Blacks, definitely. But as I say, old Sam, his brain was in good working order. I'm not sure that it was in such good working order if he'd been on for the full 80.
Yeah, but if you take into account his age, then short-term memory loss is kicking in. So it's. I just
stop generalising from the particular.
Well, sorry. Where am I again? I thought it was a great moment for him. I mean, absolutely terrific. I think the All Blacks have got that selection right, actually. I mean, he's a hell of a player to be able to bring on in moments of crisis.
Yeah. Well, all the time we see the influence of the bench, and the way that it's now become, it's a huge part of the game. There are still people out there who believe that the game is not as aerobic as it ought to be, that bringing on people who are, fresh and huge or whatever they happen to be for, 10-minute periods is actually more detrimental to the game than it is positive. And I think that that's something that should be said. It was a 15-man game. It's now a 23-man game. And that's an argument which, which many people, particularly former internationals, feel very strongly about.
Yeah, and I agree with that. It's what's allowed the game to go from an endurance game to a pure power game.
Yeah, super soft.
I don't think that's been to the game's benefit, frankly. But it's a very difficult circle to square when you're around health and safety.
It's a topic for another day, maybe, but yeah.
Right. I'm drawing a line on the quarterfinals discussion because we do need to move on, and you guys have slightly preempted it. I need first of all, match of the quarterfinals. I'm just going to throw France, South Africa at the top and see if anyone disagrees. I don't know how you can.
I am going to disagree. I actually slightly, and we're talking like 0.5%, preferred the Ireland match, and probably because my slight reservations about the refereeing in the second match. But we're talking about both matches were like off the Richter scale, but I slightly preferred the Ireland-New Zealand match.
How about we put the first half of France-South Africa together with the second half from Ireland-New Zealand?
Yeah,
That I would agree would be the ultimate rugby match.
That's not a bad 80-minute spectacle. Okay, let's get
pretty useful.
Yeah, let's get a player of the quarterfinal. And Brendan, you've said your moment, and who said Sam Whitelock?
Well, no, that was it. Sam Whitelock was my moment. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Chris,
my player of the quarterfinal. My player of the quarterfinal was Sam Cain.
Yes, I can't disagree with that. Man,
who I've never seen him play better. He's a bloke who, when you compare him to the great New Zealand sevens, he's limited. I mean, Michael Jones, Richie McCaw in a different age, Graham Morey or a Wacker Nathan, or Josh Cromfeld. These blokes did things that Sam can't do really, and wouldn't claim to be able to do. He comes in for a lot of flack, some of it self-inflicted insofar as he hasn't played very well or he's been slightly anonymous at times in quite big games. But as Sean Fitzpatrick has said on this podcast a couple of times, he is held in massive esteem in the group. He clearly presses the right buttons behind closed doors. I do credit him for being one of the few players in defeat. And of course, it doesn't happen to the All Blacks very often. He never goes close to making an excuse, ever. He fronts up. He's honest about his side shortcomings in particular performances. So I give him massive credit for that in an age of excuses. He's something from a different age almost. But at the weekend, I thought he was absolutely magnificent in a really, really hard game. I thought his tackling and his ground coverage, his involvements on both sides of the ball, he even carried a bit better than we've become used to seeing him. I thought it was a captain's performance. I thought he set the tone for the All Blacks, and he would be my player of the quarterfinals.
Nick, let's come to you. We haven't had your moment yet as well, so let's go for that first.
Who are we talking about?
I know you.
You.
Oh, right. Okay. Moment, I would say. Well, the moment that might have, that probably put France out of the tournament was the one that we've discussed, which is Colby's unbelievable charge down of Ramos's kick. It's not something, it's something that we see once in a blue moon now in the game. And the sharpness of thought, you've got to think that the way that South Africa do things, that it was pre-planned, that he was going to go out after one of them. And he would be my player of the quarterfinals as well, because I think, for that athleticism, he was absolutely electric, that in everything that he did. And he made the difference in many ways. His finishing made the difference. His opportunism and speed in getting to that. I mean, it is a statement of the obvious in some ways, because he was involved in the big moments. His try was brilliantly taken. For a small man, his ability in the air under the high ball is exceptional, and his reaction speed whenever there is broken play, his reaction speed is absolutely outstanding, off the scale. And
he's close to being one of the great wings, isn't he?
Yeah, and also he's sort of come from nowhere really, because we haven't seen all that much of him in the pool matches. So I'm not saying he's been invisible, but he hasn't produced a performance like that. So big game player. I thought he was the same in Yokohama against England. So yeah, I'd say him. Another moment, Bren, I don't want to spike your guns, mate. But another moment was Sanchez's read of Sam Costello's pass. I mean, that was those were veteran eyes. Coming off the bench, seeing something. It was obviously something that he saw from. Instantaneously, basically, but knew was coming, and he backed himself. Somebody said that it might have been a try at the other end if he'd got it wrong. maybe that's correct.
And I've seen him do that before. Sanchez is a bit of a pickpocket merchant. He's done those intercepts before. No, you're absolutely right. That was, we haven't really spoken much about that match, have we? That was an interesting match as well. There was plenty going on there.
Yeah,
he looked horrified at the distance he had to run as well for that.
Yeah.
I think we can possibly take it that the difference between Cheslin Kolbe and Nicolas Sanchez is that Kolbe, you can imagine Kolbe making the read and pickpocketing the ball in the way that Sanchez did. What you cannot imagine is Sanchez charging down Thomas Ramos's conversion.
That'd be a pretty good way of putting it. Yeah.
It was
Colby, by the way.
His first 10 meters were the slowest 10 meters on a breakaway try or an intercept try I think I've ever seen. And then he whizzed through the gears like a Sherman tank.
Thanks, Chris. You just
I would agree with Nick
that
Colby's
Sanchez on the podcast.
Sorry, what was that?
You've just burned down any chance of getting Nicolas Sanchez on the podcast, so thank you very much for that.
Oh no, I think he would be. I mean, we're crediting him with achieving something that he didn't expect to be confronted with, let alone to complete. It was great. It was a brilliant read.
It was
a good game now. It was a really good game now.
Yeah, it was.
I can only agree with Nick about the player of the round, though. I think Colby does add that. His electricity, as Nick was saying. He's a funny player, Colby. They were pretty disappointed with him down in Toulon. He didn't really produce there. And at one stage, his place was under scrutiny here with South Africa. And unlike Nick, I thought he was ramping it up in the warm-up matches. I think he realised his place was under threat. But he's an extraordinary player. He's the first cousin of Wade van Niekerk, who's the only human in history to run 100 metres in less than 10 seconds, 200 metres in less than 20 seconds, and 400 metres in less than 44 seconds. So he comes from pretty good sprinting stock. And if anybody could have done that charge down legally, it was probably him. But I'm not utterly convinced.
Just on that charge,
I can credit you, Brendan, with wearing your learning lightly. Well done. That's very good.
Former athletics correspondent at the Daily Telegraph.
No.
And
it's a good. Sorry, Nick. Go on.
I was going to say we've yet to mention Fiji, and the fact that they, even though they lost to England, outscored them by 3-2. Anyway, maybe we'll come to that with a look at the semi-finals. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, a fleeting word. We've already been going for an hour 5, and we haven't even got to this weekend's matches yet. So, well, I don't want to spend too long on that. Just on the Colby charge down very quickly, which is my moment at the weekend. And it did feel slightly seismic at the time, even though the game was still very much in the balance and we were a million miles off full time. Also, don't forget, firstly, Colby's not a tall guy. So for him to get there, it's not like it's Andre Esterhazen or Eben Etzebeth. Not that either of them would have got there, but his reach is not particularly big. Second of all, he put his arms out. The ball was down here. It's not like it was close to fingertips or anything like that. And so he wasn't close to missing it. And obviously all he needs to disrupt the kick completely is a fingertip from out there. And so even if he had gone a millisecond early, I think there's probably an argument to say that he kind of was quick enough to get there regardless of whether he'd gone early or not. It was just flush contact. And so I just wanted to put that out there and say that I think he would have got there anyway.
That's what made
all
it.
of that I agree with, but I just think the game ought to put the footage up so that we can admire it unreservedly and use it as the gold standard as to what constitutes a legal charge down.
Yeah,
that's what made it look so weird. The fact that it was almost a full body contact. It was almost all over the tee. You don't see that very often.
No,
I mean, it's a rare event anyway, but they're almost always hand deflections. But to be smashed in the sort of main part of your body almost was amazing. And my first instinct was, what the hell was Ramos doing? But it's, you know, if he's just gone through his usual address and you know, the usual timing over his technique for taking those kicks, I mean, it's an extraordinary effort. And as Brendan says, it would be nice to have some proof.
I think it's a moment where if the Springboks do go and win this World Cup, we're obviously going to have a moment of the World Cup conversation. I reckon that might be right up there, certainly in terms of pivotal moments in this World Cup. And yeah, that will be remembered for a long, long time. Right. 10 minutes later, let's actually put a line under the quarterfinal discussion, because otherwise we're never going to talk about these semi-finals. I think the fact that I couldn't shut you guys up is testament to what we just saw this weekend, which is, you know, the podcast all the better for it. Right, we've got obviously New Zealand, Argentina on the Friday, England versus South Africa on the Saturday. I'm going to jump straight in with predictions, actually. And I'm just going to see if anyone is calling an upset. Chris, are you calling an upset in either of the games?
No brainer.
No. Brendan?
No brainer.
I can't see it. I can see closer matches than some people are expecting, but no, I can't see an upset.
Nick?
Look, I guess why we never say never is because all it takes is a sending off to alter the balance of any game. And so, you know, if South Africa are flat after a 6-day turnaround in one of the biggest games that their players will ever play in, it wouldn't be surprising. England have had a relatively easy passage compared to the South Africans. There are a significant number of players who were in Yokohama, still in the England side. So they will have massive motivation. They'll be the better rested of the sides. But I don't think that they'll have enough. So I don't think Argentina will have enough, even if Marcus Kramer produces another game like the one that he produced against Wales. I just don't think. But there is a question mark about how much those games will have taken out of both New Zealand and South Africa, and that will be a leveler to a degree. I agree with Brendan, but I don't think it'll be enough. I think it'll be a New Zealand-South Africa final. But I said it would be a France-England semi-final. So no, there we go.
If England fans are looking for something to hang on to, because I was sitting down last night trying to think, is there any cause for hope and optimism? All I would say about South Africa is, you know, they've got their obvious strengths, but they only created one try against Ireland. They only created 2 tries against Scotland. And I would argue they only created 1 try against France. So if England can get their defensive game in order, and I mean, it's almost too obvious to say it, but if England can produce the aggressive tackling which they produced against New Zealand in the semi-final, almost from nowhere 4 years ago, because I'd never seen England play like that before, that England team. If they could somehow produce that, they could make it much closer than people think. And of course, and for all the reasons Nick has said, you know, there will be a bit of revenge in the air from 4 years ago. They are much more rested. You know, South Africa have played some very big matches already in this tournament. Now, South Africans are South Africans. They can probably cope with it, but not many teams could cope with the schedule they've had. So I'm not expecting South Africa to steamroller England. And I'm expecting the Pumas to go pretty well, especially if they keep Issa in the team. I don't know if Matera is anyway going to be fit, but they're much better with Issa in the team. Materia's a
He's
battered
out of the tournament,
old
isn't he?
warrior now. He's a battered old warrior, and he slows the game down when he gets the ball. Argentina, if they've got any strength now, they need to get the Carrerases involved and those backs involved, and that means they need fast front foot forward ball. Issa punching holes like he can do.
Just with regards to the going back to the box in England, do England need Freddie Stewart back because of the high ball game?
Well, it's interesting because the box is so clever that if he plays, they won't kick it to him. They won't kick it to him if he plays. They'll kick it out wide to the little buzz bombs on the wings, and they'll turn Stewart and they'll embarrass him. So England are really in a difficult place there. They pick Smith, they will be bombarded. They pick Stewart, and it'll go out to the wings.
Brent, there is no way that I would not pick Stewart. If they're putting it up on the wings or wherever they're putting it up, if it's in the air long enough, he's got a chance to get there. And he's better.
Oh, they won't be putting it in the air. They'll be doing the little grubbers in the corners to pop up for the buzz bombs.
Yeah, maybe, but it would diffuse one of their biggest weapons, which is the high ball. You know, they go to it. It's what they go back to all the time in big games. It's, and I would definitely pick him.
I think England are between a rock and a hard place there. That it's not going to work. Probably won't work either.
Won't work either way. Maybe, but I certainly wouldn't give them a free shot. Let's put it that way.
I think England were a better side in 2019 than they are now.
Yeah.
I don't think their attacking game is up to much. And even in 2019, and they played the All Blacks off the park in that semi-final. What was the try count? 1-1.
2, wasn't it? 2-1, wasn't it?
1-1. A try apiece.
Oh yeah, Manu's try was the only try, wasn't it? They had 2 disallowed England, didn't they?
Lange for England, Ardy for New Zealand.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens all the time. England's attacking game is not very good. So they don't score as heavily as sometimes they ought to. And you can argue the same occasionally for South Africa, I think. But I think South Africa's physicality, I take on board the tiredness argument and all that kind of thing. But that wasn't an easy game for England against the Fijians either. In fact, on the face of it, England are more beaten up than the Boks are.
Yeah.
There's some injuries and knocks and what. I mean, Tom Curry Tom Curry does not look a picture of health in the best of times, but Christ, he looks a right old mess at the moment. Oh yeah, I think we should mention Ben Earl, by the way.
Yeah,
who's playing exceptionally well. I mean, fantastic, and a completely different dimension to the old one-pace truck it up number 8. You know, he has brought something different to England, and he might be somebody that the Springboks will have to think twice about.
Yeah, he's a flanker. He's a flanker dressed up as a number 8.
He is. No doubt. I agree with that. But if England are clever, they can use his particular skill set, which is unusual. Particularly in this day and age, he really is like an old sort of Josh Cromfeld, isn't he? Or an old Michael Jones. He has the capacity to play in a different half of the field to all the other back rowers on the pitch because he's got terrific pace and a real nose for the opportunity. He's playing extremely well. What I would say is that I don't think that that bot midfield of Dialende and Creel is the most creative I've ever seen. But Christ alive, they don't have scramble. I mean, Jesse Creel scrambling on Sunday was phenomenal. And even if somebody like Ben Earl doesn't find ways of breaking their line, you can see Creel popping up all over the place and all in back. I mean, I think it's a tough day out for England, a really tough day out. I don't think they have the confidence, seriously, to really believe they can win that game, no matter what they say in public. I don't think it's there for them.
Yeah, I think what we did say when we were sort of looking ahead to the tournament and the potential semi-finals, which we did say would be a bit lopsided, inevitably, and obviously that's exactly how it turned out, is that it would have to be the case of the opposition to have gone through wars that England haven't. And don't get me wrong, France, South Africa, it was a battle. It wasn't on physicality level years and years apart from England versus Fiji. You mentioned Tom Curry and not looking a picture of health. There are some very funny videos circulating online of like Marcus Smith pre-game saying, oh, play fullback against Fiji, that'll be fine. And then it shows him after the game where his top lip is like below his bottom lip. So you can't say that England aren't beaten up either, to be honest. Okay, well, that kind of, I mean, it seems like we've all nailed our colours to the mast because I'm not predicting any upsets either. Everyone's picking Stewart by the sounds of things. Is everyone now?
I'm not totally convinced, but I give way to the honourable gentleman. I'm sure that will be the decision. I'm not sure it's exactly the right decision because the box will find a way of using that. But we'll see. I think they will go with Stewart.
And at 10, obviously, it will be Farrell. But do we think it should be? He obviously player of the match of the weekend. I personally think Earl deserved player of the match, but Farrell did play well. Do we think Ford deserves it, or do we think we stay at Farrell?
You got a semi-final against a box. Are you really going to sit there and say, "I know it'd be a really bright idea if we went out with our toughest, if we went in without our toughest"? The bloke's an absolute. I mean, I don't like the word, but I'll use it anyway. The bloke's an absolute warrior. I mean, yes,
Chris,
he's got
the ultimate George Ford fan. You're saying park George Ford for this one.
Well, I'm perfectly happy to see. I'm perfectly happy to see Owen at 12. I did not buy the idea that this the Ford Farrell thing was all to blame for the misfires against Samoa. There were myriad problems with that England performance against the Samoans. I just want Farrell on the pitch because he brings more. If you leave him out, you lose more than it's conceivable to lose. I mean, it would be self-harm. It's like Brexit. It would just be an exercise in self-harm.
The exercise in self-harm is, if you're trying to play any rugby, is putting Farrell at 12, because it doesn't work, and it hasn't worked since 2017. So I don't see an argument for Farrell at 12 at all. I think that Woodward's got it right when he says it's either Ford or Farrell at 10, and the choice really is made by the fact that in the quarterfinal Farrell played well and has nailed it down. I think that Tuilagi and Marchant's a player who's come on during this World Cup. He's playing better. The irony is that he's going to France and won't be available to England for the Six Nations in a few weeks' time. So, I mean, all these strange conundrums in English rugby over selection, a lot of which is about the fact that there are not all that many players coming through who are really putting their hands up and challenging the incumbents. The midfield has been a problem forever almost now. Look, there are all sorts of things, but I definitely I'd say that Farrell's he's got a free pass into the side pretty well, but he definitely made a difference on Saturday in terms of bringing them back into the game when it looked as if they might blow it. Although he's a
tough-minded so-and-so, isn't he? I mean,
yeah.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree and all that kind of thing. Andy Farrell brought a lot of the same attitude. I'm talking about this is attitudinal stuff now.
Yeah, he's a competitor. He's a massive competitor. There's no question about that.
Yeah. He's got. There's a bit of the South African mentality about him.
Yeah, but I mean, for me, it's a sort of prerequisite for an international player.
You've seen a few flaky ones down the years, Nick.
Well, there have been, but I mean, the reality is that when you're pulling on your jersey for your country, I mean, commitment is and combativeness are prerequisites. When people talk about them as if they're sort of, I mean, okay, he's got more of the magic potion perhaps than some, but I don't think it's something that England haven't had quite enough of in the last 2 or 3 years.
It's interesting. I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, none of us know how the tournament's going to pan out ultimately, but that whole number 12. I mean, it's almost the great. It's the whatever it is. It's the sort of missing link in rugby at the moment. Because nobody quite knows exactly what they want from a 12, apart from everything. So how do you balance all this stuff up? The bloke who, to my eye, makes a massive difference to the All Blacks is Geordie Barrett. When Geordie Barrett plays at 12, it opens up a whole range of options for them, because he can kick long and short, he can pass long and short, he's big enough to get you through the traffic, he's got a playmaker's instincts, his game understanding is off the scale. And he's very
Look at the other three: Jonathan Dante, Damien Dialende, and if he's not there, Andre Esterhuizen, and who are we missing out? Bundy Aki. I mean, there are 3 teams who've decided what sort of 12 that they want. The other team, New Zealand, have got something of a hybrid. He's got physicality and he's got great footballing skills as well. So, I just think that England are, the thinking isn't joined up.
No, I agree
thinking
with that.
isn't joined up. That's the biggest problem. I mean, you see other countries take players, put them positioning. Malcolm Marx used to be a centre. I mean, other nations make these transitions much better. We've got a guy, Max Malins, who's sort of, sometime winger, sometime fullback, probably a fly half who could challenge Marcus Smith for the place over the next 3 or 4 years. But he's not playing there. These are the fixes that English rugby gets itself into constantly.
I hear that Marcus Smith, I've just seen online that Marcus Smith is out of the World Cup with his injuries post Fiji, and they've called in Sam Burgess.
Yeah, well, it was your lot who decided to take up the experiment, mate, and made a complete Horlicks of it. So there we go.
Slamming Sam.
Can I also just point out the absurdity at the moment we've been there before. Alex Mitchell doing his Ben Youngs impressions. Now, he did a very good impression against the impression is getting better. His box kicking is getting better. But you've got Ben Youngs in the squad. So you've got a bloke doing a Ben Youngs impression when you got Ben Youngs in the squad. I don't understand it. I don't understand what England's thinking is there.
What and the speed game that he had, the
speed game that's just been parked. Yeah. So you've got Ben Youngs, but he's just looking a bit thinner and younger and sleeker. But, Ben Youngs is in the team. He's in the squad if you want Ben Youngs.
Do England's coaches actually fly in the face of what every other coach says and say to their players, "You're not here because of your club form"?
You might be onto something there, Chris. Because club form actually has never been that important with England.
Yeah, there's only one reason you're here, lad, and it's nothing to do with how well you're playing.
Exactly. It's mystifying. Anyway. I don't get it. But anyway, if they somehow won on Saturday, how stupid would we look? But I just don't get it. Yeah. And I'm an Alex Mitchell fan like you.
I'd love them to show up. I'm sure they will actually. I mean, that is one thing that often on these occasions England are when England are heavy underdogs, as they will be, and it's a semi-final. Semi-finals take on a little bit of love. They do tend to constrict even the best sides very often.
Yeah, I don't think that they're not going to roll over. That's for sure.
No, I don't think they will. I just don't think they're as good a side as they were 4 years ago.
No,
I don't think they're as potent in a number of areas, and
in some ways,
and I think with the box,
in some ways they're not close.
No, and with the box,
of course, 4 years ago, 10 and 12 were Ford and Farrell.
Yeah. With the box, they're doing what New Zealand did. 2011, they fell over the line, didn't they? And then pretty much with the same team, they absolutely obliterated people in 2015. Now, I think South Africa, they didn't fall over the line last year, but they did lose the first match against New Zealand, and they could easily have lost to Wales in the semi-final. So
Indeed.
It wasn't by far a flawless campaign, but so far, I think they want to rewrite their history books. They want to actually go out as outstanding world champions, and it's going to take a pretty good team to stop them, I think.
I think it all goes back to the initial point in these clutch games. I think the simplicity and clarity around your game plan is a massive thing, and the box do fewer things that are capable of going wrong than some other slightly more ambitious sides. And I think that's a great value. I think we saw it on Sunday, and the pressure they'll put on England on Saturday, I think, will force England into trying to do things that they're not particularly comfortable doing, and that's where it begins to go. That's where it begins to go the South African way. I think that's the way I would read it.
And if South African mentality in the past is anything to and in the recent past, last Sunday, by choosing to scrummage in their own 22 is anything to go by, they will know where England's Achilles heel is, and that is definitely at the scrum. So they will look we may see quite a few more options of scrummaging in their own 22.
Nick, how's Dan Cole feeling 4 years on from sort of his own downfall in Test rugby for a little while? Because he didn't. Well, that final was it.
You'd say hugely motivated, but he is. I think Dan is now, 36. So it's 4 years on. And I think he's done well at this World Cup. He's managed to become the starting tight head. England's best scrummaging front row at the moment is definitely, for me, Cole and Marler as the props. And but I don't know. You can't. With Sinclair and if Sinclair and Genge were coming off the bench against and Che and Koch, I wouldn't be comfortable with that matchup either.
He's a phlegmatic soul, is Dan, isn't he? I don't think 4 years ago will worry him at all. And actually, I think he got a bit of a rough ride after that game, because there was a fair few problems on Makavunapola's side against Malherbe as well in that game.
Yeah,
Malherbe was a big figure in that game, and as he tends not to be a big figure anywhere else than at the scrum, you can draw your own conclusions. He really is an old-fashioned scrummaging tight head, and a bloody good one, a really good one.
Yeah.
So I think whoever England pick at loose head, they need to be absolutely on it to even achieve parity. I think Malherbe's a big figure, and the deeper you go into a tournament, the bigger a figure he becomes, because scrum penalties are vital.
Well, I think Marler at his best will, against Malherbe would give him a difficult afternoon.
Yeah.
Or evening, but it's what happens elsewhere in the England scrum that's more worrying when Marler is not on the field.
Yeah.
And you're presuming that Marler won't start as well, so he'll be coming off the bench to do that.
Yeah.
Well, selection for England will be out tomorrow, so that'll be interesting. I mean, we spoke about the midfield. For once, I think in an England situation, we can predict England starting midfield, which is a rarity. Either way, we'll wait for selections, and I think we will wrap up there. So, guys, enjoy the semi-finals. I'm slightly more confident in our predictions this week than I was last week. And I'm kind of hoping that I've just jinxed it, to be honest, and hopefully we'll come back and see England in a final. Either way, Nick East is joining us next week. So either he'll be on the winning side or on the losing side, and we'll have the final to look forward to. So thanks so much, guys. The rugby just keeps on coming at the moment, and the Guinness Six Nations is just around the corner and will be upon us before we know it. Make it a year to remember by booking official hospitality with our friends at Keith Prowse, principal sales partner to England Rugby Hospitality. Their matchday experiences have a whole range of incredible features, from complimentary bars to menus designed by Michelin star chefs, namely Tom Kerridge, Ollie Deboo and Tommy Banks. So, book your experience now and make memories that will last a lifetime. Visit keithprowse.co.uk/Twickenham now. Thanks for listening to this week's edition of the Rugby Paper podcast. And don't forget to subscribe on whichever podcast platform you use and recommend the show to your friends. The Rugby Paper is available to buy every Sunday, and to make sure you don't miss it, subscribe through our print, digital and online options at therugbypaper.co.uk/subscriptions. That's therugbypaper.co.uk/subscriptions to get all our content for as little as 14p per day.